Hi Cole, Rebekah here with my Simonet reflection. What have its implications been for you as a teacher? Um, I think the biggest one is that my students could be anyone and I would have no idea. Like when they were talking at the shelter about how the bus picks the students up first and drops them off last. And it's not something I would have thought of, but it makes sense and for confidentiality reasons and keeping the kids' private lives away from their peers' eyes. And I think it's as a teacher, it's important to remember that I don't know who my students are. I don't know what their story is, and there's no reason that I should make judgments on them and assume things about them just because they're true for most people. So that was a big one that I think I've walked away with. Kids are kids no matter where they come from. I loved that playing with these kids was no different than, the kids that I see playing at recess or times that I've like babysat kids. Kids are just kids even if they don't have a home. Structure is definitely a big deal to a lot of these students, and that wasn't something that I would have thought of initially. When Jamie was talking in the video about how structure is what she believes anyway is what has helped to keep her clean and off drugs for so long, it makes a lot of sense because like my brother has bipolar disorder as well as Jamie, and I know the biggest thing that made a difference for him was once he got his medication straightened and he was on a consistent routine. He got a job where he was working 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. Like that made a really huge difference in his life, and you could see the positive effects of that. So hearing her talk about the exact same experience, I think structure is a big deal for people who come from dysfunctional places or just happen to be kind of dysfunctional themselves. To have structure and organization, it's a huge deal. And so I'm glad to see that Eastside really makes that accessible to those people at the shelter and is encouraging them to become organized in their lives. It does make a really big difference. Budget. I like that for this assignment you had us work with only $50 because as teachers we're clearly not getting into this career for the money. So that means that we need to start thinking about money when we're planning events for school and for our classrooms. Some people were saying, I don't mind contributing a little bit of my own money, and I liked that you were saying, no, like I really want to do this like on the budget because we need that practice, we need that experience, and we were able to plan 2 events under $50 on 2 different days with both very different themes and ideas. So that was really cool to see that it is possible to reach out to people around you and be like, hey, can we donate? Can you donate this? Can we borrow this? And pull it together and put together a whole event. So very cool. I liked that there were a lot of different passions for different causes when we were first brainstorming, like what do we want to do for this challenge? And it was cool to hear, I don't know, there was just a lot of variety in our classroom. Personally, I was interested in working with the elderly or doing more environmental work. And neither of those really were hot ideas in the class, so they both kind of like went to the side. But I'm kind of glad they did because I've actually never had any experience working in a homeless shelter before. I've done some like Samaritan's Purse, like with the shoe boxes that you pack them up, and I've also done Operation Care Lift in Pennsylvania where they like sort clothes and stuff. And both were kind of cool experiences, but of course you're working with other volunteers. You're not really getting the hands-on experience with the students or kids and parents themselves. So this was a really neat opportunity because it was something I'd never done before. So that was awesome. And also as a teacher, I think something I've learned from this Simonet's challenge was organization. It kind of ties into organization, but it definitely is a big deal, especially when it comes to preparing students to do something very new and different for the majority of them. Like for example, you created those directions. Like you had the video of you like driving around the school, like this is what it looks like. You had pictures with like printed detail, emailed to us way ahead of time, so we would be like, okay, so this is where you're gonna go, this is where you'll turn, we're gonna meet at the flagpole. All of those details. When you're doing something brand new, kids struggle with change, and they struggle with change to something completely different from what they know. So I really liked that you kind of modeled it for us, and maybe not even like intentionally, but what I picked up from it was, as a teacher, when you're about to do something very new with your students, you need to prep them. Like recently at the school that I've been interning in, they just implemented the breakfast program. So now the kids are eating breakfast from 8:30 to 8:55 in the mornings. And it was something brand new to them, brand new to the teachers, but the teachers sat down with their kids, the week before the program was even put in place and said, these are going to be the rules for it. This is how it works. We're going to do a practice. Let's walk through and pretend that we're eating breakfast. And at first you might think, isn't that a little bit weird? Like, why do we need to practice eating breakfast? But it's true. For kids doing these brand new things, they really need that organization and structure ahead of time to feel secure and feel prepared to do these things. So I really liked that for this assignment, you were always really on top of that, and I think it modeled something really important for us as teachers. What have its implications been for you as a person? So something I found was I kind of surprised myself at how comfortable I was once I got there, and the event kind of took off. Once people had come up from lunch, and I started playing with Karma, and she was kind of just bossing me around, and it was fun. Like it was much more comfortable than I was expecting, and so that for me personally, I just surprised myself a little bit. So that was cool. I loved that the experience really bonded us, the cohort, together. I didn't really expect that. I thought it was something we were all going to kind of, trudge through. Let's get this done. But we ended up all having a pretty good time, and we were talking to each other about what we were doing. Oh, I was doing this with so-and-so, and now we're going to do this. And it bonded us, and it also helped, I think, us to get each other excited about doing this project. So that was awesome. It also helped me to, I think, just look at children through a different light. Like, not as students, not as their babysitter, but just as kids who like to play. We all have a certain way that we like our names spelled, and we all have different, favorite foods, and we all have dreams, and it didn't feel like an us versus them situation when we were outside playing. It was very just, communal. We were all sharing, and it was cool. What have you learned about engaging with, learning from, and making a difference in the community? As far as engaging with the community, I think location is a big deal. If this had been an organization where the staff was kind of burned out, maybe they're not as optimistic about their line of work anymore, or perhaps it's not as well organized and it might be a little bit run down. Chances are, if the staff and community of Eastside Family Shelter was not as fantastic as it was, it might leave the volunteers or people who want to come in and help with a really negative impression. So I think as far as engaging with the community, it's important to find places that are going to be positive, uplifting experiences for everybody involved. In order to keep a flow of volunteers and people who want to give back, you have to want to give back to a cause. And if it's not something that you are seeing positive things happening in, or that you feel is, actually a good place with people who care about what they're doing, you're not going to go back. So I love that Eastside was definitely someplace where I was like, this is a good organization. And I think it's important for the future when planning, with maybe a future classroom of mine, to think about places that are going to be positive experiences for my students as well as the people that we're helping. Learn from. So I learned a lot about how homelessness works, like what happens. And then, of course, a lot of the rules and structures that go along with Eastside Family Shelter, and I'm assuming other shelters as well, where, husbands and wives have to stay in separate rooms. Having more children is a problem at that point in their lives, so having that separation is probably, in one sense, a good idea. But then it was also interesting when you told us about what you had discussed with that father, about how difficult that was for him, though, because the norm in their family was, everyone kind of slept in the same bed, and now they don't have that anymore. So just, interesting things to consider, and something brand new that I learned through that. Making a difference in the community. So it just feels good it sounds so cliche, but it just feels good to give back to, it just makes you more conscious, understanding, and definitely an empathetic person. When you see these kids, you can't help but empathize with them and for them. And, want to be a part of their lives. It's kind of happens naturally. And so it was just a good experience for me because I'd never worked with a homeless shelter before, and to have this kind of positive experience was really encouraging to me to know, like, oh, this is something I actually am interested in, and I just didn't know it. So that was super cool. And what have you learned about your cohort in terms of people's individual and or collective strengths, talents, contributions? Suzanne and Katie blew me away because they jumped on the face painting train and just took off, even though they weren't sure exactly what they were doing, and they ran into a few bumps along the way with certain people who came up. So I really admire them for just going for it and using their artistic gifts and talents to, bless the community at Eastside, especially the kids. I think they really enjoyed it. I also loved how Mia was talking to Jeremy, one of the boys at the shelter, and she just clicked with him. He's clearly is on the spectrum of fun, but she just found a niche and slipped right in and just sat down coloring, and he was telling her all about this trilogy that he's going to write one day, and she would nod and say, oh, that's cool, and comment back, and it was really natural back and forth, ebb and flow between them, and I was really encouraging to see that there are people who can look past the social awkwardness to the person behind it and be like, oh yeah, they're still a person. I mean, clearly Jeremy's very smart, and they could still have, I think they probably talked for at least an hour. So that was really encouraging to see that, I'm sure she didn't plan to do that day, but that she just went for it anyway. And I think that's about all I have for you.